A Good Teacher Turns Bad is a case study where Mrs. Wilson is a fourth-year administrator. She has numerous years in educational experience, and she is dealing with Miss Horton, who is a staff member in her building. She's been there for a number of years. However, there's been a significant change in her behavior and attitude. Because of this, there are numerous parents that are upset with the performance of the classroom teacher, and you've got one parent who is now insisting on moving his daughter to a different class. So not only has the building level administrator been contacted with these concerns, but they've also gone to the district level and they've contacted the Board of Education. Mrs. Wilson decides that there needs to be a parent meeting, and so she brings in Mr. Stafford, and they try to address these issues with Miss Horton. She is not prepared for the meeting, and when Mr. Stafford then shares his concerns and some of the things that he sees in the class, that his daughter sees in the classroom that he is not satisfied with, Miss Horton then responds with a little bit of an outburst, and the meeting is brought to an abrupt halt, and Mr. Stafford sent home, and now Miss Wilson is left with this situation and finding a way to deal with Miss Horton's change in behavior. So identifying the problem, some things that we know that Miss Wilson is in her fourth-year administrator at this particular building. The building is piloting a new reading program, and many educators would be more than happy to tell you about the added stress that can bring to the classroom teacher. We know that previously Mrs. Horton has been conferenced with over her attitude towards the pilot and her response to her peers. We know that there's been numerous complaints made not only at the building level but also at the district level, one of the accusations being verbal abuse, and we know that there are parents who want their students' class reassigned. Mr. Stafford, being one of those, wants his child moved out of the classroom. Mrs. Wilson arranged the parent meeting to address the issue before making any decisions. Miss Horton was unprepared for the meeting. Mr. Stafford shared his concerns. At that point, Mrs. Horton called Mr. Stafford a liar, and the meeting came to an end. Things that I would like to know, what caused this sudden change in behavior? If Mr. Stafford is seeing things in the classroom that have not been mentioned before, these other parents are making complaints that don't align with previous things, it would make you question what has shifted in Mrs. Horton's performance. I would be looking back to previous evaluations to see if this was a pattern or if this is something completely new. I would think, as this being Miss Wilson's fourth year in the building, that she would have seen something like this prior to this particular instance. If that was the case, it does make mention of some changes at home, so I think those are other things that must be considered as well. Would want to know, are students safe in the classroom? First and foremost, we are obligated to ensure that our student safety comes first, and at this point, even though it's just verbal accusations, we want to make sure that verbally and physically that these students are completely safe in the classroom and able to focus on learning. Asking myself, what support can be provided? And how do we ensure growth of both the students as well as the educators? So my proposed plan of action would have multiple steps. First of all, we'd look at providing classroom support, ensuring that there's numerous observations occurring, not only from the building level administrator, but also from other administrators. This might also be an opportunity to bring in a mentor teacher, or possibly just pulling in maybe the school counselor more frequently. Anything, strategy, data that is collected during these observations, we would want to ensure that we were documenting those. We would want to make sure that we're building relationships as the building level administrator. We want to ensure that students know that you are approachable, as well as parents knowing that you're approachable, so that if there are any concerns, they feel like those can be shared with you in confidence. We would also want to make sure that we're providing opportunities to speak with the counselors and to get those counselors in the classroom. We want to make sure that we're building relationships with the staff members. So I think it's critical for Mrs. Wilson to reach out to Mrs. Horton to demonstrate the compassion for her, knowing that there's been some changes at home. Obviously, there have been new stressors in her life to have caused that change in behavior and response. And then provide opportunities for Ms. Horton to be heard. Even though we may not agree with her actions, we know that it's important for her to feel like she's heard and her opinion and thoughts and feelings are valuable. And then working together to build a plan, we know that it's going to be much more successful if Mrs. Horton is an active part of the plan development, as well as can see the purpose in it. We would want to make sure that we're increasing the professional toolbox, finding those classroom management opportunities for professional development, as well as encouraging the self-care. If this is stemming from a change in home life, we want to make sure that we're encouraging Miss Horton to take care of herself so that she can then pour out and be what she needs to be for others in the classroom. We want to identify those stressors, discuss the recent changes to the classroom, such as the pilot program, and also reach out to see if there's other things that have changed recently that maybe as the administrator you're not aware of. Seek those possible solutions or compromises. Make sure that there's that communication of the willingness to compromise. Obviously some things are non-negotiables, but things that can be compromised, I feel like putting those on the table makes the stress level drop a little bit, as well as encourages individuals to be a little more trusting. And then taking time to inquire about the needs. I think it's very easy to assume we know what's needed or what the best next step is. However, I think just taking a moment to step back and ask for input about those needs can help us be more successful in addressing the situation. So then resolving it based on promoting the success of all students. I think we need to make sure that we're striving for teacher retention to ensure that we've got the best possible educators in the classroom. We want to make sure that we're discussing ways to connect with students on an educational as well as a personal basis. We want to make sure we're developing positive communication between the teacher and the student, the teacher and the parents, administrator and the teacher, administrator and the parents, as well as the administrator and students. And we want to make sure that we're tracking that data, we're coming back, we're visiting the data from the observations, and we're using that to embrace a growth mindset, to expand those goals and to continue to push for more change and more maturity in the classroom. And then we want to continue to modify the goals and the processes that are in place as various goals are met. We want to extend those to continue to see definitely a change, but also a cycle that pushes us to continue to be better, just as we would do for our students. Talking about thinking, feeling, and valuing things throughout the situation, some things that I am thinking as I read through this, first and foremost about the student safety and well-being. I have to question Ms. Horton. Does she still have the desire to teach, or is she just ready to be done? Question whether or not that thinking can be changed. Has she made up her mind to where she's just closed-minded to it, or is she willing to accept the help that will be extended to her? I did think, should I put students through this as the administrator? Am I doing a disservice to these students to force them to stay in this classroom until this can be addressed? And how long will it take for that change to be noticeable? And then how do I ensure student success, even for the students who are in this environment, which is obviously less than ideal? What can I do to help make sure that they are still successful in the classroom? Feeling frustrated over Ms. Horton's response to Mr. Stafford, frustrated over her response to the students, that they would even feel the way that they've expressed to their parents. I'm saddened that the students have been subjected to this and put through this daily, and that their love for education has been stifled through it. Feeling unprepared for the situation, regardless of the amount of experience. I think this is one of those situations that until you've walked through it, you're not really 100% sure how you should respond or how successful that response is going to be. And then torn between the compassion and the commitment. I am completely committed to my students' safety, to their educational success, and yet at the same time I want to make sure that I'm showing compassion to this educator who has poured her heart and soul into our kiddos, and I want to see that passion for learning for her to return. So where is that line of extending the compassion, but at the same time not compromising those commitments to my students and other stakeholders? I'm valuing the student safety first and foremost, and then the student success in the classroom, as well as as a whole child, and value quality teachers who provide various learning opportunities for students, as well as valuing learning opportunities in a various form for all of our professionals as well. I think it's important to value the growth mindset to ensure we're not becoming complacent. And then also trauma-informed really comes back to having that grace and being able to extend grace in different situations. And I feel like this is one of those situations to where there's possibly been a traumatic experience for this particular educator. And I think it's incredibly valuable for us to be able to extend that grace to her, but again, at the same time, while continuing to value student safety, success, quality teachers, learning opportunities, and that growth mindset. So looking at Standard 2, we want to make sure that we're promoting academic success and the personal well-being of every student by enhancing instructional capacity. So I think it's a fine balance of these three components. We've got to make sure that we're teaching to the whole child, we're ensuring student learning, providing various opportunities for instruction, and finally that we're stretching those instructional approaches in the classroom. To promote the academic success, we want to ensure that there's quality learning opportunities for our students and that they feel like all their basic needs are met. We want them to be able to give the attention and the focus to those learning opportunities rather than basic needs. We know that emotional security is essential for them to be able to focus on the learning. So that's going to be that trust and that respect that's got to come from the classroom teacher as well as other valuable adults in their life. And we want to make sure that we're meeting the individual learning needs of the students. We want to promote the personal well-being of each student by building relationships, customizing that learning experience to meet the individualized needs of every student. We also want to make sure that we're looking at that social emotional need from the child and that we're showing value to each and every student regardless of personality or behaviors or possibly past history. As we continue to move forward with this change, we know it's going to take some time to overcome some frustrations and distrust. And then finally, we've got to make sure that we're developing those positive relationships, not only with students, but also with the families. And then to ensure that all of this comes together to promote that student success in the classroom, we want to make sure that we are training our instructors, not only those who we're having issues with, but also those who are doing what's best for kids. We want to make sure that they have the training on the newest instructional approaches, that they remain knowledgeable about emerging trends, develop those partnerships and memberships with professional organizations, which then provides that access to upcoming and newly shared information, and that we also provide that personalized approach to professional learning in a manner that meets the needs of each individual. So although I don't envy Miss Wilson and the decision that she's going to have to make and that plan that she needs to put in place, I feel like there's a great deal of opportunities to develop a plan that would enhance the growth of Mrs. Horton and possibly, hopefully, rekindle that love for teaching again, but to do so without compromising the students' educational opportunities any longer.